are watching Melody Lane. With me, you're gonna have a great crafting time.
So you can get your video.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, of course. Distress crayons, it's a totally new medium to the world of distress, and that's what I love about them. They are a water-reactive pigment. They are different than other pigment sticks. I do not need to name names. I'll let you, as the end user, kind of determine that. But I designed something that was not an oil-based crayon. It's a water-based crayon, and I wanted the ability to do a lot of different things with it. I wanted to kind of have the versatility of an opaque pigment, but I also wanted to be able to watercolor it to get translucent effects, and I also wanted the ability to smudge it the same way you would an oil crayon. But when it was all dry, I didn't want it to be smudgeable anymore. Okay? So when you work with them, they're available in 18 colors right now, 3 packs of 6. We did kind of a bright, more of a neutral, and vintage. These are all in the Distress palette. They have a consistency, very creamy, almost like a lipstick. When you color it, the base just turns up to expose more of the medium, okay? Fits in your hand, full crayon, and you can color on it. So you can go in and draw, you can sketch, or you can create some background. So let's talk about the water reactive properties and coloring with it. When you use these, they're very different than working with a marker. Usually when we color with a marker, the idea is to get a small amount of ink on the surface and then go in with a wet paintbrush or water brush and pull that color into a surface it for watercoloring. These are completely different. Here where I scribbled, here I'm going to saturate some of the color. Let's go in with a water brush and see the difference. When I take a water brush or a wet paintbrush, the area that I have the smallest amount of medium is still going to blend, but not nearly the amount that this area is going to blend. The more pigment you have on the surface, the more it will blend out completely. The less you have, the quicker it's going to dry on the surface, okay? So what's cool about these pigments is I also have the ability to mix colors. If I wanted to combine some colors to create new colors, I can take a color, put it onto the surface, I can color directly into it. You'll see that because it's pigment, it covers it right away, but I can also blend it out. So here I'll take some of that yellow, I can blend that. Here I'll take some of that peacock feather, blend it out, or if I want to mix it, I can create new colors. So you do have the ability to blend and mix your colors as well as keep them independent of one another. Let's pick a prettier blend. I was blending green. I did that this morning too. It's like, why do you always do green? Because this makes a pretty blend. I love that. And I'm just cleaning my craft sheet. Just cleaning right there with my brush. Now, let's say we dry this. We can let this air dry, or we can dry this with a heat tool. Drying time, just however long it takes water to dry on paper. That's it, because there's no additional resins in this or mediums. But you can use this on a variety of different surfaces. If I'm going to use this on a coated surface, I don't think I have any coated surfaces left, so let's create one. I'm going to work with some Collage medium to create a coated surface that this can work on. So Collage medium is also new to the Distress line. These Collage mediums are a water-based, waterproof medium. We have discontinued glue and seal. Wasn't really a fan of glue and seal. It was a little wet for me, so when I was working with ephemera, I found that it kind of warped my medium. Multi-medium we still have, and that's a great adhesive, but more for assemblage work. Multi-medium is going to be kind of like that gel medium for wood and metal and plastic, kind of build on it. Collage medium, papers and fabrics. It is to collage. But more importantly are the finishes of Collage medium. We have a matte finish, vintage, which is a tinted medium, so it creates that instant vintage effect. And we have what's called crazing, my favorite. Crazing medium is this really fine, almost like a crackle type finish, but there is no texture. So crazing is what happens to ceramic and porcelain under the surface.
Oh, I see.
So unlike crackle that has texture, this has no texture. It has those tiny little cracks that appear under the glue, but it allows you to accent them. And more importantly, it doesn't distort any of the imagery that's on there. So when I work with Collage medium, I like to work with the new Collage medium brushes. I've designed 3 different brushes. I have a small, medium, and a large brush. What's great about these brushes, they're a very short handled brush, but I wanted something that's going to have a little bit of spring or a little bounce into it. So I'll pass this around, you can kind of brush it onto your hand. I'm going to work with this brush. Let's see, let's just do regular matte.
This is what I've been looking for.
Yeah, it's a really great brush because when I'm going to, I was going to try that out. When I'm going to go in and work with medium, I'm just going to dip this into the jar. And when I spread this on, most paint brushes, when you go to apply glue, it tends to spread glue, I think a little too much glue. When I try to control the amount of glue, it's very difficult to do that. This brush is designed that if I have the medium on my surface, usually a paintbrush, when you go to spread it out, you just end up getting more medium on there. This brush is designed that if I stand it up, I can squeegee off the thinnest layer of medium on my surface because the inside of the brush is open. So it will scoop the medium back into the brush. When you layer your ephemera, I always say that this particular medium has a drying time of now, okay? Which means when I put a piece of ephemera now, put it down, now, done. So unlike multi-medium or glue and seal where you can slide it and manipulate it, when you put it down, done, move on. Next layer, brush this on. If I want to put on another layer of media, put that on. Once it, see, now it's done. Now, even though you saw that little whoosh, once it's down, down. I love that. I'm just gonna brush this on. Now this is just the regular medium. I like to create some texture so you can see with my brush, I'm not putting on any more a medium, I'm just kind of going through. I can feel that it's already starting to dry and I want to create those textures. So this will allow me, if I wanted to, I can go in and create a linen pattern, or me, I'm just going kind of wonky with it. As far as the top coat, depending on how thick you put the medium, because if I'm working with crazing, I would want to put it on a little thicker because I would get more crazing around those edges like I do here. Not the same as what you do with crackle paint. We don't want to go on like peanut butter or frosting, but we definitely want it to be wetter, and you'll get more crazing really around those edges where those pieces try to layer up. One of the suggestions I have whenever you're working with any type of gel medium or even paint, and you're doing assemblage work, take your brush and just wrap it in a baby wipe and you won't need to clean your brush. I haven't cleaned it all day, since 7 this morning, so it'll stay wet the whole time. Yep.
Because I'm always like, put it in the water and pull it out.
Because then it's too wet, and then you have to worry about drying it, so yeah.
So you just did this, and then at the end of the day you're going to clean them.
Exactly.
And then, okay.
Yep. So especially when you're working on a project where you want to put some glue on, but you need to go work on something else, you don't want your brush sitting in the water, because when you take it out, you still have to get that water out, or you've thinned out the viscosity of your medium. All of the mediums are heat stable, so if you need to dry something very quick, like this, you can dry it, including the crazing. You can dry it immediately and it will still craze. So all those things we learned to do or not do with crackle paint, this is not crackle paint.
No.
Okay? This is crazing.
But you can
medium.
use this to stick it down just like you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
All of them are the same property.
What's on top is going to do the crackling part of it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Same with the vintage. You can place it down, so that's why you can see like around the edges, you see a little bit darker brown, because I still use that as a glue. Okay. The one thing you want to be careful of with the vintage is keep in mind it's tinted. So the more layer you put on top, the darker the color becomes. So if you put 3 or 4 layers of vintage on there, it's going to be vintage. Okay, super dark. So this is about kind of like what I did, put on that top coat and use that layer. But I love how quick it dries. I love the finish of this. And so it's going to allow me to do kind of some play things on it. So let me trim up my tag. There we go. So now we have a background that's got some medium on it, and I wanted to do that to show you the next feature when it comes to working with the crayons. If I want to create a vintage outline, I can take any of the colors. This one happens to be walnut stain, and I'm just going to go around that outer edge, carefully outline it, and I'm just going to go with my finger and start smudging this out. And this is a real easy way to create a cool vintage effect, cool shadow, just using my finger. You can see that I'm kind of pulling that crayon into that edge right there to really create that drop shadow. It has some great open time, just allowing me to go in with my finger. If I want to add some other colors, I can certainly go in, mix and match some different shades and colors with that. The crayon's not going to dry out, so you don't have to worry about putting the lid on right away. Just gives me a really cool effect when I'm creating some layered elements. Here's another feature that I love. We have picket fence. We have a white crayon, and what's nice about this white crayon is because it's a pigment, it can go over anything just to create that highlight. So here I can create that really cool kind of oxidized shadow over any color because it's going to show up.
Now when it's dry, is it dry?
Yes and no.
Okay, it still reacts.
Still.
Okay.
So this is where it starts to get really different. So far you're like, okay, yeah. This is where it starts to kind of get a little interesting. What's interesting about this particular product, because it's water reactive, is once this medium dries on the surface, it's not going to smudge off like an oil crayon will, right? Because if you use an oil pastel, every time you touch it, you're going to get some of that movement. This, once it's dry, like now, it's dry to the touch, okay? The only way to get it to react is with water. So it's never a waterproof medium, but it has a stability of touching. So if you wanted to seal this and make it waterproof, you would still use your distress microglaze over it, okay? So this one, I'm gonna go in just with some colors. Just gonna add some different colors with my crayons. So let's just work on some colors down here. And let's blend this out. I'm just switching my blending tools.
Kind of makes sense.
Just to kind of add some color on there, okay? So I'm going to do kind of a really cool, almost a resist technique on here. So I just wanted to add some color to the bottom, right? So I've got some of that medium on there. I'm going to go in with a stencil. So I'm just going to take one of the new mini layering stencils. These are all a mini version of the large one. So let's take this guy. Now, this could be dry, this could be as dry as we want it to be. If we want, we can even heat dry it. So it doesn't really matter how long this crayon has sat on the surface. You have the ability to go in and remove it. So if I want to remove some of that color, I can place this down. I can go in with just a baby wipe. That's all we need. And it doesn't have to be super wet at all, but this baby wipe is going to allow me to go in and remove that crayon, right? So it creates an instant resist right through that crayon. I can lift any element I want, any part of the background that I want to do. If you have any kind of pattern that you want to create, maybe you want to take mini lattice work. So you really have the ability to create some cool effects just using a baby wipe on the crayons. Now, we've seen them blend, right? We've seen them blend with water, but what's important with any medium is that no matter what I create in the distress line, it always has to come back home. It must, right? So it doesn't matter if we've got new inks or new paints or new whatever, it still needs to work with the ink. So this one that I was kind of showing you that I was sampling with this, you saw in here that we went in and we watercolored that. Now that watercolor is not going to react, okay? Which means I'm gonna have the ability to ink over this. So let's take a little walnut stain. Take my ink blending tool. It could be any color of distress ink. But I love that I have the ability to go over these colors with ink. Now, when I do that, you'll see right away that the color starts to resist the ink. That's a very cool feature just in its own. The fact that I can layer some ink or stain or spray stain over the top of it, it's going to resist. But if I want a little bit more resist to come to the surface, I can go in with some water, and when I spray over the top, all of my color is going to resist, even where I watercolor. It completely removes that distress ink. You're thinking, well, wait a minute, you said they were water reactive, right?
And you just
And I
took it
said,
off over there.
I'm like, kinda, but it depends. So when you're used to seeing a distress medium, anytime we have distress on the surface, so let's take something much more vibrant. Let's take Mermaid Lagoon. If I put this crayon on the surface, it's distress. What's going to happen when I wet it?
It's gonna, yeah.
Nothing. But it's still water reactive.
But you used a brush?
So this medium will only move with friction as well, which means if I'm putting this onto a surface, even if I accidentally wet an area, I don't have to worry about this smearing everywhere. It's only what you pull in, which is what makes it so great to watercolor with, which gives me the ability to blend with it, which gives me the ability to smudge it. Right?
So it doesn't move unless...
Doesn't move unless you do it. Exactly. So it's completely stable when it's dry. You don't have to worry about, oh, I'm going to touch it, I'm going to smear it. It's completely dry. But if I want to move it, I can wet it and pull it off. So one of the things...
water on that, it won't move, but if you did the baby wipe, okay.
Correct. So that means a lot of people are used to taking like a pigment stick and coloring a rubber stamp and spraying with water and stamp with them. You cannot stamp with these. Because if you do that, spray it with water and touch it, it's not going to transfer off of the stamp because I didn't want it to, because I wanted it to be a resist with my ink. So that's a big difference. If you're used to taking those and coloring the stamp and you spray it, you're going to stamp it and be like, it's still on my stamp. So you'd have to pretty much take your stamp and like drag it across the paper to get it to move off of your stamp, which I think defeats the purpose of that. Yeah. But I like the ability to also go in and I can create a palette. So I can color on anything I want and obviously pick up that pigment and still color with it that way. If I have metal embellishments, we had some word bands. Where did I slide them? These guys over here. You have a lot of metal accents that have words. I love that I can take any of these crayons and go right over metal and I can fill in any of those letters. So unlike working with acrylic paint where you have to wait for it to dry, this is going to be dry as soon as you're done coloring it.
Or you can wipe it off the metal.
Yep. Done. Yep. So a really quick way to accent and highlight metal, highlight charms, highlight anything. So distress crayons, they're pretty cool. Yeah. I love the way they work. I think they're super interesting and a lot of fun. So yeah.
Changed my
Different.
total view on those.
I know. Everyone
They
saw
came
them
out,
and they
I'm
were
just
like,
I don't think so.
yeah. And it's like,
Hey, I'm honest. It's like,
yeah,
it's true.
that's all right. And I'm okay with people being like that because, but with me, I can't just do what's already done. I need to do it like
Well, that's
a little different.
Yeah.
And for me, I love all of these products and I use them for what they do, but I found myself really wanting to try to get the opacity of paint sometimes. But sometimes, even though these are reactive with water, which I love, sometimes if I'm trying to layer a lot of colors, I'm not getting that really bright color because it's still an opaque medium. It's got, you know, kind of that dull ability. Where this looks like I sprayed a bunch of colors of ink, but I didn't. There's no ink in there. It's the fact that it still has that opaque look, but when you blend it out with water or smudge, it gives you that translucency of it.
now. So if you don't want that to, you're gonna put.
If you
other
didn't
stuff
want it
on
to
top
move
of
at all,
it.
you can
Yeah.
put distressed microglaze over the top of it, and then it would be truly waterproof. No matter what, you could do a baby wipe, whatever, it's going to be permanent on it. Yeah. So I think that's really a great feature. But this effect, super awesome for people that love to watercolor.
Yeah,
To be able to
still
watercolor with these, and then go over your background with hickory smoke or weathered wood or whatever, and be able to spray that and get these kind of effects. I mean, if this was not a crayon, if this was, say, broken china ink, and I went over with walnut stain, it's going to be walnut stain, because ink over ink is just more ink. So I think it's
Now,
a
the
pretty
crayons
cool
on
feature.
this paper without the medium on it, is it not as, does it do as
No,
well, or is
no,
it-
absolutely. So one of the features that you have to keep in mind, we're dealing with the pigment now. So we're not dealing with the dye. So even if you want to go in and watercolor on a manila tag, it's going to blend on a manila tag. Whereas a marker doesn't do that. Or if I had something really light and I'm used to coloring on watercolor cardstock, I can color on anything because it's a pigment. Game changer. Yeah, so all those things where you think, okay, if I'm using a picked raspberry distress marker, I can't color on that, it will just be brown. But all of those surfaces, regardless of what you put it on, is still going to blend with water, right? Whether it's watercolor paper, whether it's manila, or whether it's substrate sheet. So, yeah, all going to be water reactive.
Thank you,
They're a lot of
Tim.
fun. You're very welcome. That thing is so cool. Did you flip them back and forth? Thing?
Yeah.
Awesome. It is.